Welcome to week 11, day 49 of the spring 2025 Web Technologies course. I'm Jim Coppin with Rankin Technical College. So first, I wanted to bring up that this week is going to be our last hands-on test. So I'm sure you'll all be glad to get past that. So this will be our last one for this course. Then after that, we're going to, I'll talk about the hot later on, probably towards the end of the lecture here. But we're going to go over Chapter 8, which is jQuery. And for that, we're not really, there's multiple chapters regarding jQuery. We're not going to cover multiple chapters with jQuery, and I'll explain that a little bit more here in a few minutes. So why we're not going to cover multiple chapters. And then after that, there's chapter 12. So we're going to skip from chapter 8 all the way up to chapter 12. And chapter 12 is some more advanced JavaScript. We're going to be doing some more advanced string type functions and dates and the math class. So we'll be doing a little more advanced stuff there on that. So one thing I did want to bring up is some current concerns with written test. And, this doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but, I do kind of want to mention the importance of the written test. And so, and I know in the past I've said, use any resource for the written test. But if you're completing your written test or any of the assignments for that matter, and you're not feeling like you're not really learning anything through that process, it's really going to hurt you. And, so, I know that there's a lot of external options, so to speak, available. AI tools such as ChatGPT and others. And if you're just using those tools just to get some quick answers and filling them all out, and you're getting done with that test and you really didn't learn anything, it's really going to hurt you. There's some students that are completing the test in such record times. There's no way that I can see that they're actually spending the time on each question. It's just every time you start your test, it's recorded from the time you start your test to you complete your test. And when students are getting those done like in record speeds, there's just I know I couldn't do anything. You got some people within 3 minutes they're doing their test. That's just really, kind of unheard of. I don't think it's really possible. So, kind of just wanted to bring that up. So, please spend the time to work on those questions. If you are using some of the AI tools, if you want to use a question, find out what does this mean? What does that mean? The important thing really the most important thing is that you're actually learning something throughout that written test. Okay. And so if you're going to use some tools and you want to say, what does this mean? What does this mean? Explain this or explain that, that's good. But if you're using AI just to complete your whole test, you are really hurting yourself, because what's going to happen is employers and interviewers, they know that students are doing that, right? They know students are getting through courses using the AI tools without really learning. And they're going to weed those students out right away. Those applicants out right away. That's going to be their first thing. It's not. You may, and there's some things you could do to fool me or whatever. And I can't spend all my time trying to figure out if people are actually, doing their work or just using AI tools to get the work done. And they are very important tools, and you should be using. And, in the second year in this program, we will use AI tools a lot more, okay? But you really need to have those fundamentals down. If you don't have those fundamentals down, you're not doing yourself a favor, okay? So you just kind of want to mention, when you do use AI tools, especially for coding, there's markers, there's patterns for AI code generation that, you kind of spend some time. If I really spend a lot of time, I can pick out some things. And especially if some of the code that people are writing are way too advanced, all of a sudden, you're doing some basic stuff in your coding assignments, and all of a sudden it's really advanced stuff. You're getting that from somewhere, right? And I do want you, like I said, in the future, and even for explaining certain parts of code, I do want you using those tools, but just as a replacement instead of, well, I don't really want to, instead of really learning the concepts, you're just doing that to hurry up to get through your assignments to get them done. Okay. You really should be spending 20 plus hours a week, 20 or more hours a week on this course. That's what it's kind of set up for. And, it's only going to benefit you to spend the time and to learn the concepts. Okay. So I guess that's all I have on that. I am gonna. There's a few students I'm gonna be sending emails to about concerns I have but so if you don't receive a email this week, then for the most part you're okay. Not that even though I'm gonna send these emails, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna accuse anybody of doing anything. It's just I have concerns. Okay, that's all I'm going. That's the direction I'm using. Okay, not that I'm going to be trying to get anybody in trouble or saying anyone in trouble, but I have just concerns from what I've seen. Okay. The next thing I wanted to discuss here is ideas for your web portfolio. And this kind of falls in line with the whole getting your first job and everything. But I guess first I wanted to mention that, I did send out an email last week stating, if you're, and this is just from my perspective, and maybe I'm more conservative. I know people pretty much put everything out on the internet nowadays, but I think it's best on your web portfolios. And I know it's just GitHub, the likelihood that people are going to be running across that much unless you're giving somebody your URL or that, right? Most likely. Not to say that search engines won't kind of search engines will rank those and everything else, but if people aren't hitting them, if you're not getting a lot of traffic to them, it's not really going to be a high in any search thing. So as far as a bunch of people coming to your portfolio website is very likely, but just for common sense, for security and privacy reasons, I wouldn't include your phone number or your address. And some of these web portfolios, I know some people use some of these Bootstrap templates, and they have like birth dates on them. I wouldn't put your birth date. I wouldn't put your address. And I and it's up to you. Like I said, maybe a little more conservative than what other people would do or tell you. But I wouldn't put your phone number either. But now I would have a resume where you have maybe, have your phone number, but not the one that's on the web portfolio. That'd be maybe a separate one where when at some point you're sending that to an employer, you could have a separate one for that. Okay. But, just for the one out there on GitHub, I would just, have your name, your email address, maybe your LinkedIn profile, and your GitHub repository link, and that's about it, from my perspective. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention on that. And then as far as the portfolios themselves, really spend time on this web portfolio, even though this assignment's done. I know, obviously, we're always cramped for time when we get, the assignment done, and that's great. You need to do what you need to do. But, you need to spend additional time on this going forward here, be thinking about it a lot and think about some things you can put on there. Some ideas is, if you can find some people, some friends, or family or anybody that may want their own little portfolio website built, if you can find that and build a few different ones, and you can start out by just putting them out there on GitHub, and if they want to spend the money to get them hosted somewhere, that's a different conversation. But just get some experience building things. The more you build, the more you code, the better off you're going to be, right? To get that job. So anything you can get to add to your portfolio, as far as coding experience, start thinking in those terms. Okay. I did want to mention getting that first job. You really need to start working on that process sooner than later. You really don't want to wait until you're done with your degree. And just to back up a little bit as far as your web portfolio and so forth, really just getting this degree, it's not enough. To be frank with you, honest, just getting a degree and saying, okay, I got this degree, and sending your resume all over the place and say, I got this degree, I want a job, that's kind of like your foundation. That's like your step one. Here's what I have this degree, and then what can you do on top of that? What's in your web portfolio? How do you show that what kind of coding do you have there in your GitHub repository? Can you explain all the code you have? All those things are going to be very, very important. Okay. Now, but as far as getting your first job, probably the one and I'm going to go into this more in the future weeks here, and through the whole next year as well, the second year as well. But you really need to. You're probably the number one best way for your first job is people or people that know people that right? I would start out by creating a list of people you know. You can use like maybe Excel or Google Sheets or whatever else, and create a list of people where they work, any contact information you have on those people, and just start creating that. Some people have more contacts than others, but everybody knows somebody, right? Everybody knows somebody who either already works in technology, or they work maybe at some companies that have a lot of technology workers. Maybe, even though you may not, even though there's some people that that, oh, well, they don't work in technology. Well, but still them, right? So, and every company uses technology, in their organization, right? Maybe some of that stuff's done in other cities, or they hire certain task out. But a lot of companies, especially your bigger companies, they definitely have technology departments, right? So just because you don't know somebody who works, maybe you don't have a lot of people know you work in technology, but they work for they work for companies. They might do other things there, but they still know people within their organization. So I would start out to really create your list of your personal contacts. Like I said, your name, their company they work at, any contact information you have on those people, and go from there. Okay. That's how I got my first job, is by networking. Personal networking, right? So I think that'd be a good thing to get started with. Okay. Is create a list of networking contacts. So like I said, we'll talk about that more in the future here. Just kind of wanted to, point that out, something you can kind of get started on right away. You don't really want to wait until after you graduate to start working on your networking list and start working on getting your web portfolio in order, right? You want to have that stuff pretty much all done by the time you're graduating, which, this is something that obviously the web portfolio is something will constantly be evolving, but you don't want to kind of just wait for the last minute to work on that, so. All right, that's enough on all that. Let's go ahead and start looking at JavaScript Chapter 8, which is basically get started with jQuery. Let me bring up. Okay, so as far as jQuery, jQuery is a library, a JavaScript library. And the difference between what like a library and a framework. So a library tends to be simpler, kind of a more of a narrow scope of functionality. You know, you could bring in a library and just use calling some special function in one place within your code that uses that library, and that library is going to be something that you're going to have to be bringing in from a JavaScript perspective. You're bringing in some JavaScript file, some external JavaScript file, kind of like what we did for Bootstrap. Bootstrap, we brought in the CSS file, right? And we also brought in that JavaScript file because some of the functionality in Bootstrap also used JavaScript. So, that was where we were bringing in those. Now, Bootstrap is pretty much a little more considered more of a framework than just than a library. Okay, Bootstrap offers, when you start using Bootstrap, you're not that you can't do other things within that file as besides Bootstrap, but for the most part, you're really using all that function, a lot of different functionality that's available to Bootstrap, right? So, frameworks tend to be bigger than libraries and contribute more to the overall page weight, so to speak. But, frameworks can also include libraries itself, okay? So, from a Bootstrap perspective, Bootstrap is considered a front-end framework, because it, provides a structured foundation for web development, right? Different components you can use, etc., right? Libraries usually, like I said, it could be some simple little function that you call it, and that's it, right? But as far as jQuery is concerned, jQuery started like in 2006. And when jQuery started, the first release, I shouldn't say started, but when the first release of jQuery was 2006. And the reason behind jQuery at that time was pretty much that, like JavaScript, a lot of things in JavaScript years ago used to be a lot harder, okay? But now with newer versions of JavaScript, later versions of JavaScript, plus these other frameworks like Bootstrap, and you've got React, and you've got all these other different framework stuff, that jQuery really kind of has lost a little bit of relevance, because a lot of things that are adopted is because they're fixing something in the development environment, right? They're making something easier. They're solving a problem, and jQuery was solving a problem. Back in the day, when JavaScript wasn't advanced and it was harder to do some things, jQuery made some things a lot easier, okay? And there are some things that are still easier to do with jQuery, okay? But for a lot of things you can do with jQuery, today, you can also do with just really native JavaScript. And when I say native JavaScript, I mean just the JavaScript that we've kind of written up into this point where you're not really importing or bringing any other files, right? When you start bringing in files, that's when you're using a library or using a framework, right? Next, I was thinking, so as far as jQuery, though, jQuery is used in, like, we can look at the statistics on this page, and almost 64% of the top 1 million. Now, it depends on where you get your statistics from. Okay, this is this site. All right. But, I've seen numbers larger than this. This is actually smaller than some of the numbers I've seen. I've seen numbers of percentages up to 70% of the top 100 million or something websites use jQuery. So jQuery is still used a lot. But even though it's used a lot, when new websites are coming along, a lot of the builders of the new websites, programmers, developers, organizations, they're actually they're using other type of frameworks and libraries than jQuery, but still, once a lot of times once a company starts using something, they kind of stick with that for a while, and sometimes if your whole team knows jQuery and you're wanting to build a new page for some reason, it's very easy let's just keep on using jQuery, right? But when you're wanting to build more advanced, more modern type websites, then most likely you're probably going to be moving on to something different than jQuery. Okay, but a lot of the sites that are already out there, like these statistics say, of the top 1 million, 64% use jQuery. The top 100K, it says 67, etc. So this is kind of a chart showing the jQuery usage stats. I kind of wonder about this because it didn't even start. Maybe this was, I'm sure jQuery, they have, before an official release, they're working on it and usually they have what's called beta releases. I don't know about the statistics here. They have this starting in 2000. I guess they're saying 2000. I don't know. But this early on, really officially, it wasn't until about 2006. But I'm sure that some people start using a framework before there's the initial release. There's usually those beta releases, right? The initial release is usually a stable release, so maybe that's where this comes into play here more than anything. But the official release was in 2006, and you can see it just took off, right? Now, how accurate this is, I am not sure. Okay, how accurate this is, I'm not sure. Let's see what this does. I haven't even tried this. It's all the internet. Yeah. Okay. But definitely, quite a rise in using it. And as you can see out here, you can see it's kind of leveled off. It's kind of dropping down a little bit. So there is, a little less usage than there used to be. That's because probably people are using more recent frameworks and so forth, right? So the reason we're kind of, wanted to go over jQuery here a little bit was because it is still used. And if you get a job out there, if you're working at places where they're one of the top 1 million sites or top sites, they may still be using jQuery, right? And so it's kind of good still to know that, okay? So that's why we're spending a little time on jQuery. But there's multiple chapters in your book regarding jQuery. Chapter 8's the first one. There's also, I think, Chapter 9, 10, 11. All of them are kind of jQuery, but we're not really going to cover all of those. Just kind of want to do a quick overview of jQuery, learn a little bit about the syntax, how to use it. We'll do a written test, we'll do a lab assignment on jQuery, but we're not going to get too involved in it, okay? Let's go look at how to find out, find out if somebody is using. Here's a local, small little website, especially a lot of these little small websites. People build these things and years ago, and then they don't really update them much. So, a lot of times they're not going to redo them all the time. So this one I kind of looked at earlier. I was surprised that actually it's using the latest version. So they did update something, the later version of jQuery. But to see how, basically view the source and do a find on here and do jQuery. And you can see right here, line 82, they're using a jQuery min version 3.71. So this is actually the latest version. So, and actually, I know I looked at this a while back ago, also, this website, and I know that this was a older version of jQuery. So obviously they went ahead and updated this. And this is, a lot of sites don't update, especially smaller little websites that get built and they don't really maintain them like they should, and they're using older versions of software, right? Libraries and so forth. But yeah, they're using jQuery. And what else can you tell by this? It's always worthwhile to look at source code of different sites, and it helps glean different things and for your own understanding. And so what you're seeing here, I can tell by looking at this, they're actually they downloaded the file. They downloaded the jQuery file, and they're using one that they have on their local machine. On their server, they've actually downloaded it, as opposed to a CDN. We've done content delivery networks, CDN for all of our Bootstrap stuff. We use CDNs, right? So you can use CDN for jQuery, or you can download it. Same thing as what you can do for Bootstrap as well. But I just want to point that out. So let's look at this site for jQuery. So jQuery is a fast, light, and feature-rich JavaScript library that simplifies many common tasks in web development. It was created by John Rosine and first released in 26. It makes it easier to manipulate HTML documents, handle events, create animations, and interact with the document object model. All right, and we were just went over really a lot on the document object model last week. So I was just telling you prerequisites. This is just a kind of a quick tutorial. We're just going to go through a little bit of this. But, same for prerequisites. It's good to understand the document object model, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript basics. Really going to help you when using jQuery, right? So how do you use jQuery in your project? All right. So just like we did for Bootstrap, and we can go ahead and bring that in, right? And this is using Google's API. There's different CDNs that are available. This is using googleapis.com to bring in jQuery. But let's go ahead and go look at kind of the official site here. So here's jQuery's official site, and I'll send you links to these different resources. But so here's jQuery's official site, and this is basically the download page. Here you can download jQuery. So this is basically as simple as clicking on this, and here's your jQuery min file. And you can just right click in here and do save as, and you can just go ahead and save this file. Okay, you save this file, and then bring that, put that within your project directory and use it that way. All right. Now that's one way to do that. Let me go back here. The other way is using a CDN. I do want to bring up, there's kind of different versions also. They have what's called the min version. That's where it's basically usually all, compressed together. It's all compressed. You can't really understand what's going in there because it's all compressed. They do that so it takes up less file, less size. It's called the smaller footprint, smaller file, right? But they do have, besides just the min version, they also have what's called the slim version. And the slim build is the slim versions just kind of have a lot of your basic stuff without including everything, right? So they pulled out some of the modules. To make it slim. But, you can just use, for our purposes, it's fine just using the min version, and basically the compressed one right here, the download. So you can either download it, or you can go ahead and come down here to the query CDN, which is your content delivery networks, right? Click on these releases, and you got uncompressed. So if you actually did want to go look at it, here's the uncompressed one. It's going to take a little more. It's going to be a little bigger a file. Well, even though you're not saving the file, you're using a CDN to bring it in using your script tag, just like we did for our Bootstrap stuff. But even though it's saying that was the uncompressed one, it's going to be bringing in a bigger file into your thing. So it does takes a little more time. Maybe it's negligible over the network, but everything adds up, right? Especially when you got a big complex web application, you want to try to keep things as small and compressed as possible in most cases. That's up to you. Up to you. But that one was the uncompressed one. Then here's the minified one, and you're just going ahead and using the CDN, right? Just to kind of review real quick on the CDN stuff. So what happens is, even though you would think, sometimes including your file, well, or let's just say you're linking to, if you're linking to your file within your code, that is a separate call to your server to bring in that file, right? When you load your index.html file, when you load your HTML file and you have a reference to a JavaScript file that you've downloaded, right? Like in our case, we're dealing with local files in our project directories. But when a website that's online is going to be running on a server, right? So when that file, when someone clicks a link or whatever for your website, and that comes, when that gets rendered in their browser, when that comes to their browser, it's going to actually bring in that JavaScript file. Even, if you have that local and you're not using a CDN, you have that local within your server, right? On your server, it's going to be a separate call to bring that in. Now, let's say you're using, let's say, you wanted to go for some very cheap web hosting, which most people do, individuals and so forth, and, sites that are not heavy traffic, they're going to go for, and for cheaper hosting, which those companies are, you're not going to have a huge, those servers might just be in one city or one small geographic area. They're not spread out through the whole country, right? That's how they keep the cost down, right? There's going to be a lot smaller of a geographic area where that is, and you may be in California, but you're calling a server over in New York, right? Some of the cloud type stuff is spread out throughout the country, or, sometimes there's organizations that have their own data centers spread out throughout the whole country or world is also. But when you're dealing with a small little website on a server somewhere, it'd be, like I said, it could be in New York and somebody's calling your web server from California. There's a little latency with that, right? And so if you're calling that JavaScript file that's out there in New York, on that server in New York, it's going to take a little time for that to come, Now, the advantage of that CDN, when you call that CDN, it's actually using that content delivery network. And those networks are all over the country, all over the world. So believe it or not, sometimes you would think, well, it'll be faster if I just include that in my code. Obviously, what we're doing locally, yes. But when you deploy something to a server and you have that locally on your server, right? And you have that local on the server, it's still a file on your server that's going to be called, okay? But with that CDN, them CDNs are all over the place. They're actually going to be a lot faster. Just something I kind of wanted to bring up just for your own knowledge to kind of understand how that works a little bit. So those are two of your best options there. Using the CD, and your CDN is really your best option for speed. And I don't know, like we've been putting things out on GitHub. I don't know how GitHub's infrastructure works and how, I would think it's pretty complex. And you having kind of curious if you had a local file within GitHub that you're accessing. I'm talking about when you use GitHub Pages to have your like web portfolio and stuff like that. I kind of want, that might be a little less latency. I don't know the benefit of the CDN in that case, but probably the CDN still better. But I'm kind of made me think about that. I'll have to look into that a little bit. I'm kind of curious about that. So okay. So also, since we're out here, this is the jQuery. This is the official site. Here's their, the different documentation they have. Obviously, you can see a lot of things are deprecated. These are much older versions. But this is the official documentation for jQuery. And if you're interested, you can take a look at that. So that's how you use jQuery in a project by using a CDN, or you could just include it. Now, one of the first things is I know we've had some assignments where we went ahead and used we created those dollar functions, right? With the name dollar and using like query selector, etc. Query selector, because query selector all, it depends on however you have your method written. So, but we created those dollar functions. So, but the dollar function is actually something that jQuery uses internally. Okay, so if you'll look at this example down here, you're using this. This kind of looks familiar, right? Because we kind of did this when we create our own functions. But you won't be needing your own function. You don't need to create your own function because this is internal to jQuery. This is how jQuery does this, okay? This is how they handle this as well, okay? So there's a little overlap there, and it can kind of cause a little confusion, I can see. But because, we did create our own dollar functions for some of the assignments. But in this case, we're not creating our own dollar function. This is actually how jQuery, this is the function that they've created. And by you bringing in that JavaScript file or having your JavaScript file embedded, either way, you're automatically using the dollar function of jQuery, okay? So there is a lot of overlap. And this is the same thing here, name of the ID of a class, name, ID, class, yes, okay. One thing I did want to point out is I know that we've used, for the DOM content loaded, remember we did the add event listener, DOM content loaded. So this is, and this is the different than how jQuery does it, because actually jQuery, I think jQuery was doing this before that function, those kind of functions were available in JavaScript. I'll have to go back and look at that, but I'm almost sure jQuery was kind of doing this a little earlier than I think JavaScript was doing it, but in a different way. But the whole add event listener is newer than jQuery's ready function they have. Okay, so, but the same thing here. This is basically saying, right? What this ready means is once the document's loaded. Once the document's loaded, you can go ahead and do this. Okay. And this is using what's called chaining, right? So you're basically getting your P element, your P element, and this is, since you didn't specify, this is getting every P element on the page. And then you're setting the text of your P element to Geeks for Geeks, which is the website here. Here you're changing the HTML, changing HTML content. And you can change your HTML comment by using this. So, these are some little different type functions, right? That little different type wording than we've used before, right? It's basically, This is still an ID though. It's getting this ID and then it's setting the HTML to be this. So you'll see some things that are look a little similar. Here's your button .click function. The important thing, like I just really want to make sure that you realize that whenever you see this in your jQuery file, this is referring to jQuery. If you don't have a function, create it yourself with a $sign, like we've done on those other exercises. You know where you're using jQuery, right? If you have this in your code and you comment out where you're bringing in your JavaScript file, your jQuery file, it will not work. Steps to run the code. Okay, didn't want to go through all of this. Here's some advantages of using jQuery. jQuery simplifies the process of traversing and manipulating the document object model, making it more intuitive and accessible. And like I said, even though in later versions of JavaScript, when we talk about native JavaScript, not library, there's a lot of functionality that's there now that didn't used to be there. That jQuery's not as beneficial as it once was, right? But it's still there's some things that it does that's a little more easier to understand and a little more compact. So for DOM manipulation, event handling, jQuery simplifies the process of handling events, making it easier to attach and handle events such as clicks, key presses, and more. Provides Ajax. Really haven't talked about that much. And Ajax is basically you're calling things from outside your code. It's calling API request, okay? Kind of the same thing as we're using a CDN to bring in a JavaScript file. You can also call and get data in other ways. For our RSS midterm assignment, in that case, I know I kind of showed you this, but just to kind of review on that, so for the RSS stuff, we actually just copied the RSS, the data, the JSON data, and put that in our directory structure and went ahead and looped through that data just locally, right, using that RSS, that XML file. But there's also ways to actually make a call to those RSS feeds and bringing back that data a different way, and then traversing through that data, right? And so making calls to do things like that, jQuery uses what's called Ajax for that. Okay. Now in later versions of JavaScript, it's done a little bit differently. You use the fetch. You use a fetch method. Okay. But Ajax was kind of the original way to do that, and people used that from JavaScript and also using it from jQuery as well. Not to say it's not still used, okay, but it's just a little different terminology nowadays on that. All right. So let's go ahead and let me see if there's anything else I want to cover here for right now. I think we'll go ahead and look at some of our code here. So I've got some examples here. And this one's got both the HTML and the JavaScript in the same file. Actually, what I think I'm going to do here, I don't know if you've kind of learned this, experienced this yourself, but let me fix this, okay? There's a split editor. I don't know if you've accidentally clicked this or learned, you basically use this to split your editor. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that so we can kind of look at it's taking the same file, right? There's jQuery 3.html, and it's the same file, but then I'm wanting to look at this JavaScript, when also looking at the HTML. So first, to go through this real quick. So what I'm doing is I'm using these data targets. What this data target does, right? So all this wording here, jQuery selectors, this data target is actually these different, on the right-hand side in the browser, these different headings right here, okay? And then, but this uses this data target, and this data target refers to an ID, which refers to this. So this data target refers to this ID, and so all of this belongs kind of to this section here, which is right here. So when I click this, what's going to happen, because in our JavaScript file we have something where we're hiding it or we're not hiding it, right? And so by clicking this, it's going to unhide what we have here. So let's kind of take another look at that. Actually, something's really wrong with that selector thing, but that's okay. So let's look at that real quick. So for our JavaScript, what we're doing is we're using the ready function. And even before that, let's just real quick go up to the top here. Just got a little bit of styling. So basically, I'm using this is basically, the one that I've got from the jQuery website. So this is the CDN, right? This is the CDN for that. And we're using has the integrity tag and the cross origin tag. And if you kind of recall, we talked about this when we talked about Bootstrap. This makes sure that this is the accurate file, right? And the browser is going to check that. And if this doesn't match what's on our integrity, this hash code, if it doesn't match that, it's not going to work, right? So just to kind of review that real quick. So obviously, I'll do that one. Something's wrong with my selector one. So obviously that's making that like that. That's working. So if I just change one of these, add something and hit save. So now it's not working, right? So, and if you recall, just kind of reviewing here, essentially you're going to be using these types of things a lot. So, well, it's just basically saying $, not defined, right? Because it didn't bring in that file, so it's saying $, not defined, right? And if we go ahead and fix this, that should take care of that. And now it should be fine, and it's fine. And basically the same thing. So kind of really the point I was saying earlier about JavaScript or jQuery using that $, function, right? So basically you could do the same thing as just by me commenting this out and hitting save. Same thing. And if you go F12 here, it's going to do the same thing. $, not defined, right? So like I said before, we were creating when we use just native JavaScript, we were creating our own $, functions, but that is the $, function is a part of the jQuery library. All right. So that's that. So let's come down here. And so here we're doing document.ready, right? Like I said, this is similar to using native JavaScript and doing the document.add event listener, DOM content loaded, right? So this makes sure that your document's completely loaded. And then this is setting, it's registering an on-click event for each, for .item, right? So dot's a class. And so it's every one of these is, if you go back up to here, well, let's not keep going back and forth. Let me just go over here on this side. So for each of these items, right, it's putting a click, it's registering a click function, which for each one of these, right? And then each one has a different target. It has this target, so it gets the target. the data target, and this data target is going to be selector, right? So let's just kind of actually test that. So we have a target, right? So it's not going to work. Shouldn't work initially. Let me go here, F12, and down here to console. I'm going to put target, probably should say undefined, yes. But if I click on one of these, and now I go target, no, what happened there? It's not saving it at that point. Oh, yeah, the only way you're going to see it when you stop in the code here. So I was doing some stop in the code. I'm sorry. I don't want to, I'm just confusing you anyhow on that. So I was doing a little debugging and I stopped in the code. But yeah, so obviously, since this is within the scope, you're not going to have access to this target unless you created that outside of here, right? So this is using var. You really shouldn't use var at all, right? It's a little old school there. So basically, like I said, this is creating a target, and this target's going to be here's the target: selector, events, hide, show, fade, slide, animate, stop, get. And this is just this example. You don't necessarily need to know all of this for your assignment. Just kind of showing you some things that are possible here. And then so the IDs are each ID on these for each section here is matching this target, right? So the first one is first one is selector, is button, select button. So you're doing an on-click function on that one, and you're getting demo, okay? And so you're looking for a dot, which is a class of demo. So you've got 3 of them that two have demo, this third one don't. And you're basically saying if it has demo, go ahead and change the color to red. And then so if I go ahead over here and select all paragraphs, since it has demo on these first 2, it's going to be red. The third one is not going to be red, right? Events button. So that was .css. So basically that's .css. So these are going to be a little different than what you've seen before in the native JavaScript. Okay, so you have to realize that some of these you can't use the different functions that are available necessarily that's in the native JavaScript for the jQuery stuff. You're going to have to use the ones for jQuery, right? So if you get confused at that, you need to go look at the documentation. So .css to change the color. .text, right? So this is going to take it's going to look for event message. And here's the event message. And so it's basically going to do a .text on event message and add that text. So we're going to go ahead and click events here. Hit click me. It's going to say button clicked. So it went ahead and put right in here on the left-hand side, right on here, it went ahead and added button clicked, right? The next one is toggle. And this is hide and show. And it's kind of similar to what I'm hiding and showing here on this whole page, but this is just basically much more basic. And this is probably what you'll do. I think in your assignment, there's going to be something on here where you're going to want to be doing toggles on something. So, this is similar to an accordion type situation where you're toggling this on and off. Right? So this is similar to maybe, like the Bootstrap stuff, but, the Bootstrap, you can style it. You can do a lot more with the accordion stuff in Bootstrap that you hear, but this is just very basic. And this is a toggling thing. So you can toggle any kind of tags, div tag, whatever. And then that's all you need to do on that, right? Just toggle. And here's called a fade toggle. So let's go ahead and take a look at that one. So this will fade out and in. You'll have to watch it carefully. You know, you can see it's slow, still a little bit fast, but it's slowly going in, slowly coming out, right? So that's a fade. Fade toggle. Okay, let's look at this one here. We're just going to do a slide toggle. And I'm going to click this. So it kind of slides it up and down, right? Whereas this other toggle, let's see here. Hide and show. Hide and show just kind of like expands that, or slides a little bit. Slides, you can see it moves, right? Where hide and show is just automatic, boom, it just pops open, where this kind of slides is a slow slide. Let's see what else we got here. Animate. So when we click on here, we're going to see this move. Move and get bigger. Okay. And then we're still, okay, so what would we do on that? So all we did on that, let's take a look at that one here, the animate one. Again, kind of didn't look at the code much. Let me just refresh this page. Animate. So basically here, this is how you do an animate. Dot animate, and you're doing a left, the opacity of 0.05, so you make it a little, you know, it's a little bit transparent there, right? And a height and a width. So that's something you can just go ahead and play with if you were interested in it. It's for animation. And here, this is the stop one. So you got a button to start the animation. And then you got a button to stop it. Okay. This one is get. You know, so basically, you're putting a value in a box, and you're getting the value. Thing just to remember, a few things to remember. So obviously, you're just going to have to really be cognizant of that jQuery has its own functions, and they're a little different. Some of them are going to be different than what we've done with the the native JavaScript up until this point, right? You know, the .animate, .stop, they're different. And also, you kind of remember, when we get a value from a input field, we did .value, kind of like this, right? Well, it's different in jQuery. jQuery uses .val, right? So you'll have to kind of really watch that so you don't get confused between those. All right, let's look at I've got another one here. Close this one. Pretty much the same thing. Same thing here, using these data targets. Let's go ahead and take a look at those. So here you're just basically setting a value. Let's go ahead and go down here. So okay. Sorry. Set value. So just setting value text, right? Add. So this is going to append. This is going to append this. So when you're doing append, you're actually using You're putting the HTML in there. And this is just going to add another item. Let's see, remove. Let's look at remove here. It's going to remove the last item. So it's going to keep removing items. And it's using, you know, we've done this a little bit, right? So this is saying getting the last child, right? So here, let me go back to this new item. We have here, oh yeah, I added both. That didn't impact this other one though, did it? No. Okay. But, you know, it's using this last child, right? You know, we've done this before. This is how you add a class. So this has got a class called highlight, right? The CSS class defined up here called highlight right there on line 48. And so this is adding this class to class target. So let's see, add to class, and now it's highlighted, right? So this is saying, so this one here, it's basically saying, you know, we want to change the background color. CSS, background color to light blue. Here I'm going to change the color right there. Dimensions. So this is kind of cool in a way, you know, it could provide some functionality here that might be interesting for you. But this will actually get the width and the height of something on your page. So actually, you know, could be used for different reasons. It could even be used for kind of debugging purposes or laying out things on your page and stuff like that, if need be. This will get the dimensions by clicking this. It'll get the width and the height. So it's going to get the width and the height of this area, right? Of what's defined right here. Well, I'm sorry. What's defined right here. Traversing. Let me refresh this. I'm not sure that this is. So this is just getting the next item. It's basically getting the last item in this case. Next item, active item, li active next. So this is how you get the next item. And here's how you get the text off the next item, right? So you've defined next item by doing .next, and then you get the text of that, which is item 3. All right, let's look at so back to this, you know, make sure you and I'll send you links to this stuff, but because be very confused, you get very confused between the native JavaScript and jQuery. So here's a documentation for that, and I'll go ahead and send that to you. And then here's a jQuery tutorial, W3 Schools. Could be helpful for you as well. Yeah, it's basically you click on it, things are disappearing as you click on those. So just going through the different functions. A lot of these are going to be functions that we were kind of already going through, but hide, show, fade, slide, animate, stop, callback, chaining, get, set, add, remove, all these different ones there. Okay. So I'll send you a link to this. Obviously, you can find that yourself, but just for resources that are available to you, I'll go ahead and send it to you. All right. let's see what else we have here today. Yeah, let's go through some of the assignments here. So the first one here is the hands-on test. And so obviously don't get confused between the jQuery stuff and this hands-on test. So we're just using the, basically the different things we've learned in chapter 5 through 7 on this. Make sure that that you notice where it says DOM in here for document object model, that you're actually updating the DOM, right? You don't want to just have this stuff visible in your HTML document. You're wanting this to be based on, you're going to be wanting to update the DOM for these different things in here, right? It points out DOM in multiple places here, right? So obviously some of the stuff is going to be for our online course, a little different online than in-person class. Make sure you're using Bootstrap on each one of these. I think this is pretty, self-explanatory, this assignment. I don't see a lot for me to mention. Just follow these things. It's one thing a lot of students do, especially on the hands-on test. You need to, I'm gonna go one by one, right? So if you didn't do that, you're not going to get the points for those items, right? I've probably been more lenient. I know I've been more lenient than I should have in a lot of cases. As time goes on, I'm probably going to be a little less lenient. So, I'm going to go one by one. If you didn't do that thing, I'm going to take off those points, right? A lot of times I've taken off just partial points, but, if I'm probably going to be taking off bigger chunks of points if you're consistently not doing things. So not a lot I see here for me to go through. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So the important things, make sure you're using document object model in a lot of these. It's pointing out document object model. Make sure you're using Bootstrap on all of these. That's about it. So, and you have until Wednesday by midnight on this. And then the Chapter 8 homework, which I don't have here, is basically just doing the, let me bring that up here anyhow. Let me bring that up. So just wanted to point out, make sure you're doing the ES6 course. We were doing that basic algorithm course. What was it, like 113 or whatever it was of different questions. Here we're just going to do the ES6 course. Okay, so there's less questions in there, but make sure that you're doing the correct course. I think that this link is correct here. Let's take a look. So yeah, make sure you're doing the ES6 course, right? As opposed to this one up here. But obviously it's smaller, but it's a little more complicated though. So, all right. Then the other one was, so here you got the Chapter 8 exercises. And so, like I said, make sure now this Chapter 8 here, this is going to be for the jQuery stuff. So you're going to need to make sure that you bring in, use the CDN or download the file. You might as well just use the CDN. So you need to go ahead and grab the jQuery file, the code for bringing in that jQuery. Make sure you're using the latest, which is what, 3.7.1. So go ahead and grab that. And then in this first exercise, you're going to use the jQuery ready handler. And this is actually a shortcut of doing that same .ready. We did that ready. This is actually just another way to do that. Okay. It's the shorthand version. And so basically you can just do this and then go ahead and put in all your code here. So then make sure you use jQuery to attach your listeners. You know, you're not using the native JavaScript, you're using jQuery to attach it. And so when I say you're using jQuery, you know, you're doing the $, right? So as long as you don't have that function, if you didn't create that function in your own file, then anytime you use that $, you're automatically going to be using jQuery. You don't have to get too confused about that, right? So use jQuery to attach the listeners. And then it has some different jQuery type things of has class, add class, remove class methods to expand and collapse the text. I'll look at this a little bit more to see if there's something that maybe I need to go over a little more than we did. But for now, so basically here your collapse that you're doing expand and collapse, right? You'd use that toggle, right? It's as simple as using that toggle. Adding and removing custom CSS classes, expanding and collapsing. And then here's an image gallery. You can create your own here, or you can use something that you may have already have from before, from previous assignments. But not too much here. It's just two different exercises. Obviously, you know, it might take you a little while to learn the jQuery way, so to speak. But not too bad. And like I said, we're not gonna spend a lot of time on jQuery here. Basically, this is your own only assignment. This and the written test, just to kind of get a little bit of an introduction to jQuery. See it working, see how it's a little different, and that's about it. And like I said, you know, there's still a lot of websites out there that are using jQuery, even though if you go somewhere where you're doing brand new development, you're probably not going to be using jQuery, but you know, it is still possible. But just wanted to kind of get you a little bit of exposure to jQuery, so that you have that. So if you get asked in an interview, at least you can say that that you've used it and you have a little bit of knowledge about it. So that's about all I have for today. Tomorrow we'll go ahead and, like I said though, I'll go ahead. I'm going to go through this assignment in a little more detail myself and figure out if there's anything I feel like I really need to go over to help you guys through this. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But that, like I said, that's all I have for today. Please let me know if you have any questions. And tomorrow we'll go through Chapter 12, which will be a little bit more advanced JavaScript features.